I watched my own son hand the keys to my house to his mother-in-law while I stood there in my nightgown, clutching the eviction notice he'd just served me. Mom, you're getting old and forgetful. Sarah's mother needs this space more than you do. She's helping with the grandkids while you just exist here. My hands went numb. The paper fluttered to the floor. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't believe the man I'd raised was throwing me out of the home I'd sacrificed everything to keep. I'm grateful you're here with me right now. If this story touches something deep inside you, please hit that like button and subscribe. And I need to know I'm not alone in this. Tell me in the comments what country you're watching from, because I want to see how far this pain travels. My name is Eleanor Hartwell. I'm 68 years old, and until 20 minutes ago, I thought I was safe in the home where I'd raised 3 children, buried my husband, and survived 47 years of memories. But maybe I should start from the beginning, from the day I first suspected my son Michael had stopped seeing me as his mother and started seeing me as an obstacle. It was 6 months after he married Sarah. I'd paid for their wedding $15,000 from my retirement savings. I'd funded their honeymoon to Hawaii. When they couldn't afford the down payment on their first apartment, I sold my grandmother's diamond ring to help them. When Sarah got pregnant with Emma, I liquidated my jewelry collection to cover hospital bills their insurance wouldn't touch. I thought I was being a good mother, a supportive grandmother-to-be. I thought I was building bridges with my new daughter-in-law. I was wrong. The first crack appeared during a Sunday dinner I'd spent all day preparing: pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans from my garden. The same meal Michael had loved since childhood. "Eleanor, we need to talk about boundaries," Sarah announced, setting down her fork with deliberate precision. "Michael agrees that you're too involved in our lives." I looked at my son, waiting for him to defend me, to remind his wife how much I'd done for them. Instead, he nodded silently beside her. This was the boy I'd worked 3 jobs to support through college. The young man I'd stayed up all night, helping with term papers. The son I'd held when his father died. When little Emma was born, they moved into my house temporarily, just until we get back on our feet. Mom, Michael promised. That was 2 years ago. Sarah's mother Helen visited once and never left. Suddenly, I was the stranger in my own home, tiptoeing around my own kitchen, apologizing for existing in my own living room. But what I discovered in Sarah's purse that Tuesday morning changed everything. I was doing laundry, their laundry, because somehow that had become my job too, when Sarah's purse fell from the bathroom counter. Contents scattered across my bedroom floor. Lipstick, receipts, car keys, and among the scattered items was a real estate listing for my house. The price made my blood freeze: $340,000. Below it, Sarah's handwriting in blue ink: "After Eleanor moves to assisted living, can close by March." I sat on my bed, the same bed where my husband had died, where I'd cried myself to sleep after his funeral, staring at the evidence. They weren't just pushing me out, they were selling my home. The home where I'd nursed 3 babies through fevers, where I'd hosted birthday parties and Christmas mornings, where every room held pieces of my soul. That evening, I discovered the full scope of their betrayal. I was returning from the mailbox when I heard voices through the kitchen window, Sarah and Helen, speaking in hushed tones. "The old lady won't suspect anything," Sarah whispered. "Michael's got power of attorney for health decisions. We just need one doctor to sign off on her mental capacity." "What about the other sons?" Helen asked. "Won't they object?" "David lives in Seattle, Thomas in Denver. By the time they know what's happening, it'll be done. We'll have her declared incompetent, moved to state care, and the house sold before they can interfere." I pressed my back against the wall, my heart hammering so hard I was sure they'd hear it. My own son was planning to have me declared mentally unfit. They were going to steal my home, my independence, my dignity. That night, I made a phone call that would change everything, but first, I had to play the perfect victim. For 3 weeks, I became the confused old woman they needed me to be. I asked the same questions twice. I forgot where I put my reading glasses, even though I'd hidden them deliberately. I left the stove on once, setting off the smoke alarm just as Sarah walked through the door. "See?" Sarah told Dr. Morrison during my routine appointment. "She's declining rapidly. We're worried about her safety living alone." Dr. Morrison nodded sympathetically. These transitions are difficult for families, but assisted living might be the safest option for Eleanor. I played my part perfectly, signing papers with trembling hands, looking lost and frightened when they spoke about me like I wasn't there. But every document they showed me, I photographed secretly with the smartphone my grandson Thomas had taught me to use. Every conversation, I recorded on the voice memo app he'd installed. Meanwhile, I was quietly moving money. Small amounts they wouldn't notice, 500 from checking to savings, 1,000 from savings to a new account at a different bank across town. I closed my safety deposit box, removing 40 years of important documents, birth certificates, insurance policies, my husband's military records. Mom seems more confused lately, Michael told his brothers during their weekly video call. I listened from the kitchen, washing their dishes slowly, methodically. Maybe we should visit, David suggested, from Seattle. No need to disrupt your lives, Michael replied quickly. Sarah and I have everything handled here. Handled, like I was a problem to be solved, not a human being who'd given him life. But what Michael didn't know was that I'd already called my real estate lawyer, Robert Chen, and the trap I was setting would destroy more than just their plans. My first ally was Mrs. Rodriguez next door. She'd been watching through her kitchen window as Sarah's mother threw my flower pots in the trash. That woman has no respect, Mrs. Rodriguez whispered over the fence. I've been taking pictures of everything, Eleanor. Something felt wrong about how they treat you. My second ally was Janet from church. She'd noticed Sarah rolling her eyes during my prayer request for family unity. Honey, I've seen this before, Janet said, squeezing my hand after service. Greedy daughters-in-law, pushing out mothers who sacrificed everything. But you're stronger than you look, Eleanor. I can see it in your eyes. My third ally was Robert Chen himself. I'd hired him secretly, meeting him at coffee shops, while Sarah thought I was at physical therapy sessions. Eleanor, what they're attempting is textbook elder abuse, he explained, reviewing my photographs. But we need more evidence before we can act legally. So I gathered more evidence. I recorded conversations with my phone, hidden in my cardigan pocket. I documented how they served me canned soup for dinner while eating takeout from expensive restaurants. I photographed the master bedroom they'd claimed for Helen while forcing me into the tiny guest room at the back of the house. Most importantly, I discovered Sarah's complete plan through her laptop, left carelessly open one afternoon while she showered. Email chains with realtors discussing motivated sellers, messages about my inevitable nursing home placement. Even a Pinterest board titled New House Renovation Ideas, featuring granite countertops and hardwood floors. They were already planning how to spend the money from selling my home. On the morning they planned to serve me eviction papers, I was ready with my own surprise. But first I had to survive one more humiliation. The knock came at 6 a.m. sharp. I opened my front door to find Michael standing on my porch with official-looking papers while Sarah filmed everything on her phone, smirking behind him like she was documenting a victory. Mom, this is for your own good. You're not safe here anymore. I stood there in my nightgown, barefoot on the cold tiles of my own entryway, as Helen emerged from my master bedroom, wearing my late husband's flannel robe. The robe I'd saved for 43 years, the one that still smelled faintly of his cologne. Eleanor dear, don't make this harder than necessary, Helen cooed, jingling my house keys like she owned them. The moving truck comes at noon. We've packed your essentials. I looked past them to see 3 cardboard boxes labeled Eleanor's room sitting by the garage. 47 years of life, reduced to 3 containers that could fit in a car trunk. Where am I supposed to go? I whispered. Sunset Manor has an opening, Sarah announced cheerfully, still filming my humiliation. It's assisted living, but the rooms are adequate for someone your age. I knew Sunset Manor. I'd visited friends there before they died. Overcrowded hallways, smelling of disinfectant and despair. Overworked staff, who barely had time to check on residents. Shared bathrooms and mystery meat for dinner. What about my furniture? My photographs? My mother's china? Storage unit, Michael said coldly. Not meeting my eyes. We'll sort through everything later and decide what's worth keeping. Later meant never. They meant to throw away my entire life. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared at her window, shaking her head sadly. Other neighbors gathered on their porches, whispering behind their hands. Sarah kept filming, probably planning to show her friends how difficult the old lady was being. But as I stood there in my nightgown, clutching that eviction notice with shaking fingers, what they didn't realize was that I'd already set in motion something that would destroy them all. 3 hours before Michael knocked on my door, I'd made 5 phone calls that would change everything. Call 1. David, you need to get on a plane. Now, your brother is stealing your inheritance. Call 2, Thomas, I'm sending you documents through email. Your father's will specifically states this house cannot be sold without all 3 sons' written consent. Call 3, Mr. Chen, execute Phase 1, file the restraining order, and freeze all property transfers immediately. Call 4, Detective Walsh. I have evidence of elder abuse and fraud. I'm ready to press charges. Call 5, Channel 7 News. I have a story about family betrayal that your viewers need to hear. As Michael handed me those eviction papers, police cars were already turning onto our street. The moving truck pulled up, just as Detective Walsh stepped out of his squad car, adjusting his badge. Michael Hartwell, you're under arrest for attempted fraud and elder abuse. The color drained from my son's face, like water from a broken sink. Sarah dropped her phone, the screen cracking against my sidewalk with a sound like breaking ice. There must be some mistake, Sarah stammered, her confident smirk vanishing. She's mentally incompetent. We have medical documentation proving it. From Dr. Morrison, who's currently being investigated for signing false mental capacity evaluations. Detective Walsh smiled grimly. We've been watching this operation for months, ma'am. Helen appeared in my doorway, still wearing my husband's robe, now pale and trembling like autumn leaves. Mrs. Hartwell, Detective Walsh continued, your neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, provided extensive video evidence of the abuse. Your lawyer, Mr. Chen, has documentation proving this property transfer was attempted fraud. And your sons, Thomas and David, are flying in to contest any changes to their father's will. The real shock came when Detective Walsh opened his folder and revealed who had really been watching them all along. Mrs. Hartwell hired a private investigator 2 months ago, Detective Walsh announced, watching Sarah's face crumble like old paper. Every conversation was recorded, every document photographed, every plan documented. James Miller stepped out of an unmarked van parked across the street. He'd been posing as a handyman, doing repairs around the neighborhood while documenting everything happening inside my home. We have footage of you discussing selling this property. Miller addressed Sarah directly. Video of you moving Mrs. Hartwell's belongings without permission. Audio recordings of you coaching Dr. Morrison on what mental symptoms to look for. Sarah began crying, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of pure rage. She's manipulating all of you, Sarah screamed, pointing at me with a shaking finger. Eleanor is vindictive and controlling. She never accepted me into this family. The growing crowd of neighbors murmured disapproval. Mrs. Rodriguez stepped forward, her voice strong and clear. I've lived next to Eleanor for 15 years. She welcomed you with open arms, paid for your wedding, supported your family. This woman has been throwing away Eleanor's possessions and treating her like a servant in her own home. Michael finally spoke, his voice broken and hollow. Mom, I didn't know it would go this far. Sarah said you were getting confused, that you needed help. You served your own mother eviction papers, I replied quietly. At 6 a.m, while your wife filmed it for entertainment. Helen tried to slip back inside, but Detective Walsh stopped her with one raised hand. Helen Morrison, you're also under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and illegal cohabitation and stolen property. The moving truck driver, confused by the chaos, asked who he should be taking orders from. From me, I said clearly, my voice carrying across the street. This is my house. Always has been. Always will be. But the biggest revelation was yet to come. When Detective Walsh opened his second folder, Sarah Morrison, Detective Walsh continued, his voice cutting through the morning air. You're wanted in 3 states for elder abuse schemes identical to this one. The neighborhood fell silent. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. In Florida, you convinced an 82-year-old man to sign over his beach house before disappearing with $50,000. In Arizona, you married a widower and had him declared incompetent within 6 months of the wedding. In Texas, you and Helen bilked a grandmother out of her ranch. Michael stared at his wife, as if seeing her for the first time. Sarah, what is he talking about? Your wife's real name is Sarah Beth Morrison. She targets families with vulnerable elderly members and significant property assets. Helen Morrison isn't her mother. She's her partner in these operations. Helen and Sarah exchanged panicked glances. The web of lies was unraveling faster than they could contain it. The pregnancy that brought you together. Detective Walsh addressed Michael directly. Hospital records show Sarah was never pregnant. The miscarriage she claimed to have suffered never happened. She used a friend's ultrasound photos and fake medical documents to trap you. Michael sat down hard on my porch steps, his face buried in his hands. The man I'd raised, despite his betrayal, was also a victim of Sarah's elaborate manipulation. Even your marriage certificate is fraudulent. Detective Walsh continued. Sarah is still legally married to a man in Nevada, who she abandoned after cleaning out his bank accounts. David's rental car pulled up behind the news van from Channel 7. My middle son ran toward me, gathering me in his arms for the first time in years. Mom, I'm so sorry. Thomas is on the next flight from Denver. We had no idea what was happening here. Sarah made one last desperate attempt to control the narrative. Eleanor planned all of this. She's been lying and manipulating everyone from the beginning. But Mrs. Rodriguez held up her phone, showing months of video evidence. Janet from church stepped forward with documentation of my regular lucid conversations. Dr. Peterson, my real physician, appeared with my actual medical records, showing perfect mental health. As the handcuffs clicked around Sarah's wrists, she whispered something that made my blood run cold. As Detective Walsh read Sarah her rights, she leaned close to my ear and hissed, "This isn't over, Eleanor. I know where your grandchildren go to school." The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Even in defeat, she was trying to terrorize me. But I'd prepared for this too. "Detective Walsh," I said calmly, "you'll want to add witness intimidation and threatening a protected person to those charges." Sarah's eyes widened as she realized I was still recording everything. The small device in my cardigan pocket had captured her final venomous words. "You see, Sarah, you taught me something valuable these past months. You showed me that predators rely on their victims staying silent, staying ashamed, staying isolated." I looked at my son Michael, still devastated, but finally seeing clearly through the fog of manipulation. "I forgive you, Michael. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. You'll need to earn back trust through actions, not words." David helped me back toward my front door, past the boxes labeled Eleanor's room that would now be unpacked and returned to their proper places throughout my home. "What happens now, Mom?" David asked, his arm around my shoulders. "Now we heal, as a family, without the poison Sarah brought into our lives." The news crew approached respectfully, asking if I'd share my story publicly. I considered their request carefully, thinking of all the other elderly people suffering in silence. "Yes, I'll speak, because there are other seniors suffering right now, believing they're powerless against family manipulation. They need to know they're not alone in this fight." Thomas called from Denver Airport, crying when David explained everything that had happened. My youngest son, the one who'd taught me to use a smartphone, had unknowingly given me the tools to save myself. Helen and Sarah were loaded into separate police cars. Sarah kept turning back to stare at me with hatred, so pure it seemed to radiate heat. "You have no idea what you've done," she shouted through the car window. But I did know exactly what I'd done. I'd reclaimed my dignity, my home, and my family. I'd proven that being older didn't mean being powerless. As the police cars disappeared down my street, I realized my victory was about to inspire something much larger than I'd ever imagined. Within hours of the news story airing, my phone began ringing constantly, not with threats or condemnation, but with gratitude from strangers. "Mrs. Hartwell, my name is Margaret Thompson. I'm 74, and my daughter-in-law is trying to do exactly what happened to you. Can you help me?" The calls kept coming from across the country. Elderly people sharing stories of family betrayal, property theft, and emotional abuse that mirrored my own experience. Each story broke my heart and strengthened my resolve to help them fight back. Channel 7 asked me to appear on their morning show. I accepted, wearing my best navy dress and my mother's pearl necklace, the same one Sarah had tried to pawn without my knowledge. Mrs. Hartwell, what would you say to other seniors facing similar situations with their families? I'd say document everything that happens. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Reach out for help from people you trust. And remember, being older doesn't make you less valuable or less deserving of respect from your own children. The interview went viral within days. Comments poured in from around the world. Watching from South Africa, you're an inspiration to grandmothers everywhere. London here. My gran needs to see this story. From the Philippines, thank you for fighting back with such dignity. A law firm in Chicago contacted me about representing other elder abuse victims without charge. A nonprofit organization asked me to speak at their national conference. Publishers inquired about book rights to my story. Michael began therapy to understand how he'd been manipulated and controlled. Our relationship would take months to heal, but for the first time in years, we were talking honestly about what had happened. "Mom, I don't know how to make this right," he said, during one of our difficult conversations. "You start by never making me feel unwanted in my own home again. You continue by treating me like the woman who sacrificed everything to raise you properly, not like a burden to be managed or discarded." David and Thomas visited regularly, now helping repair damage both physical and emotional. We had real family dinners again. Meals where everyone's voice mattered, and no one filmed my reactions for mockery. But the most meaningful moment came 6 weeks later, when Mrs. Rodriguez knocked on my door with homemade cookies and tears in her eyes. "Eleanor, because of your courage, I've helped 3 other women in our neighborhood stand up to abusive family members. You started something important that's spreading beyond just your story." As I looked around my reclaimed living room, surrounded by restored family photos and my mother's china back in its proper cabinet, I realized this was just the beginning of something bigger. 6 months later, Sarah and Helen were convicted on multiple counts of fraud and elder abuse across 4 states. Sarah received 8 years in prison. Helen received 5. They were also ordered to pay full restitution to their previous victims, totaling over $200,000. Dr. Morrison lost his medical license for participating in fraudulent mental capacity evaluations. The assisted living facility they'd chosen for me was investigated and shut down for substandard care and financial exploitation of residents. But the real victory wasn't their punishment. It was reclaiming my power and self-worth. My house feels like home again, for the first time in years. David and Thomas visit monthly with their families, and their children actually want to spend time with Grandma Eleanor. Michael is slowly rebuilding trust through consistent actions rather than empty promises and apologies. I've spoken at 12 conferences about elder abuse prevention. My story has been featured in magazines and television news programs nationwide. I've helped establish a 24-hour hotline for seniors facing family manipulation and financial abuse. Most importantly, I've learned that age is not surrender, that being vulnerable doesn't mean being helpless, that family loyalty should never flow in only one direction. Yesterday, I received a handwritten letter from a woman in Australia whose story mirrored mine perfectly. She'd watched my interview online and found the courage to fight back against her abusive son-in-law, who was trying to steal her late husband's farm. "Eleanor," she wrote, "you showed me that dignity doesn't have an expiration date, and neither does our right to be treated with respect by our own children." As I sit in my restored living room, surrounded by photographs of my late husband, my children, and grandchildren, I feel something I hadn't experienced in years: complete peace with my choices and my future. The doorbell rings. It's Mrs. Rodriguez, with another neighbor who needs advice about family manipulation. I invite them in, put the kettle on for tea, and prepare to share what I've learned about fighting back with grace and determination. If my story touched your heart, if you've seen your own struggles reflected in mine, I need you to do something important for me. Hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, Mammoth, because every person who finds strength in this story makes my fight worthwhile. Remember, you are never too old to reclaim your power, never too vulnerable to demand respect, and never too alone when you're willing to fight for your dignity with courage. Thank you for being part of my journey toward justice.